On yesterday's Happy Families podcast, I had one of the most important and valuable conversations about bullying that I think we've ever had here on the pod. And we've talked about bullying quite a lot. Professor Donna Cross, who works now with the New South Wales government, an emeritus professor at the University of Western Australia, is talking to us about how we can help our kids if they are being bullied. Donna is the New South Wales Chief Behaviour Advisor with the New South Wales government, talking about how we can make prevention happen in schools to keep our kids safe. And today on the podcast, we're going to talk about the ubiquity of bullying. I think it's pretty much everywhere. I'd be surprised if there's a single school where it's not happening, at least in some way. It's absolutely all over the place online. Some kids are more likely to be bullied than others. And if your child is being bullied, today on the podcast, we unpack what to do to help them to get through some of the hardest things that they will encounter as students. That's next. Stay with us. This is the Happy Families podcast, real parenting solutions every day on Australia's most downloaded parenting podcast. I'm Dr. Justin Coulson, and today I'm joined once again, a continuation of yesterday's conversation with Professor Donna Cross from the University of WA. Donna, I gave the long bio yesterday. I'm not going to do it today because there's just so much for us to discuss. Here's my first hard question. I'm going to start with a personal story. One of my daughters was bullied quite significantly during grade 8, so much so that after working with the school and not making any progress, we ended up taking her out of school and homeschooling her for about 18 months before she finally in grade 10 said, I'm ready to go back. So we found another school and she's been doing quite well since then. I'm in schools on an almost daily basis, giving presentations for parents, often about resilience and anxiety and from time to time, bullying and the challenges around it. It's my belief that bullying exists in some form or another in pretty much every single school in this country. I'd love you to respond to that and tell me, am I right? Am I wrong? What are the prevalent stats like at a school-by-school basis?
Really sadly, about 50% of Australian children report that they were bullied at least once in the last year at school.
That's astonishing. I mean, that's huge.
It is certainly huge. And, so for some children, it's an episode and it stops. But for other children, a smaller minority, about 20% of children, it continues over time, year after year. And really sadly, one of the biggest predictors of the likelihood of being bullied is if you've been bullied before.
I wasn't aware of that stat. That's really tough. So yesterday on the podcast, we talked about preventative factors. We talked about protective factors. We talked about risk factors for children being bullied. Today, I want to get really focused on what to do if your child has been bullied, whether it's happening face-to-face or online. Oh, last time I looked at the stats, it seems that the face-to-face bullying happens more than online. Can you just confirm that for me, or has that changed?
No, certainly is much more prevalent, even though the media has kind of picked up on cyberbullying and it gets a lot of attention. Up to about 15% of young people report that they've been cyberbullied in the last 12 months at a level that is that's hurt them to a degree. Probably nearly 40% of kids will say something awful has happened online to them, but it's not necessarily bullying. But being bullied face-to-face, whether that be covert bullying or more overt pushing and hitting and so on, but being left out, having friends taking stuff from you and being threatened, 45 to 50% of children sadly are reporting that. So it's still the most prevalent, but the two sit together. Some people have said that cyberbullying and face-to-face bullying is, same wine, different bottle, same fleas, different dog. It's just a different way that it's delivered.
So before we talk about what to do, what are the signals? What are the things that a parent would be attuned to identify that something's amiss and that bullying is happening in their child's life?
Yeah, it's tricky to pick up on because a lot of the changes that happen, through late childhood going into adolescence are often related to changes related to adolescence.
So, moody and irritable and staying in their room all the time, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Moody, distance from parents, sort of pushing away, those kinds of things are hard for us to monitor, but just things to be mindful of. More children are bullied around year 4 so 10, 11 years of age, than any other time in their life. So that's an important cue for parents to be kind of watching their children around this age. And of course, all that we're going to talk about shortly needs to be delivered well before children are in year 4. So, but if your children are older than that, there's still things to do to support them. The next big increase in bullying happens through transition. From primary school to high school. And the smoother the transition, the less likely the bullying. But where we as a school structure muck up friendship groups, and sadly, as a result, when children move into a high school environment, those children who are bullied kind of reassert the social hierarchies within the school. So when we think about what should we be watching for, first of all, we need to watch developmentally. What are the changes we see within our children? We need to know our children really well, and we need to know their friends as best we can, as much as we're allowed to. So having friends over to your home is a great way to see how your children relate to their friends, so that you can then observe those friendship changes. If that same person who was their best friend isn't coming over anymore, and maybe your child's spending much more time alone, maybe they're doing things online where you can hear them, where they're touching their keyboard in angry ways and then coming away being in a very sad mood. Those are the kinds of indicators in amongst all that beautiful change that's happening at adolescence to help you notice those social changes and emotional changes, and often physical changes, not sleeping, having difficulty eating would be some key cues.
Let's say we identify, either because our child tells us or because we're attentive enough and somehow the signals are loud enough that we can identify that our child is being bullied. What are the appropriate action steps? This is so complicated, isn't it? I mean, we've seen news stories where parents have gone into schools and had some things to say to the bully, to the student who's harming their child. Obviously, that's not a good option. But what are the options? What do you see as being the most effective?
Yeah, and such a good question. Thanks so much for asking, Justin. We ran a study that was called Keeping in Touch, and we conducted this study because we found that the majority of children in our research, that when we asked them if they were bullied, did they tell someone? Boys almost told no one. Less than 10% of boys said they told somebody if they were bullied, and about a quarter of girls said that they told somebody when they're being bullied. So a lot of kids aren't telling. And we then ask them why. What is it that adults are doing so wrong that you're not trusting us to come and tell us when these things are messy, or that you're telling us really late when it's got so difficult to address? And they said that there are 4 things that we don't do well. And we've put these 4 things into a model just as a way to remember, a bit of a rubric. I use this all the time. And the model that I remember is called LATE. So LATE. The L part is that we don't listen very well, according to the kids. They say we hear a bit of what's going on and then we take over immediately. We don't ask more questions like, tell me more about who was there, what happened. So maybe it would happen at the bus stop. Who else was at the bus stop? Were there teachers there? So that really deeply understanding the situation and giving your children time to tell their story without rushing in. So that's the L part. The A is that they say we often are quick to get to the solution without recognising that it really is hurting them. And so they said the second stage is acknowledge that it hurts. So they want to hear us say something like, that sounds really tough. Just giving them a moment where you show you believe in them and you believe what's happened and you appreciate it's difficult. They say we often say things like, and I know I've said this, so, say it with great shame, oh, don't worry, there's plenty of other people you can play with. And they said that just shows we completely don't get, what is so important to them and having those friends around them. So that's the second step, acknowledge that it hurts. That sounds really tough. The third stage, is it okay if I go through all these stages, Justin?
Oh, totally. This is so valuable. I've got a couple of questions and things that I want to pick up on and comments about each of them, but let's go through the LATE acronym first because I think this is so valuable.
Okay. So the third step is to talk about options. That's what the T is about. So here, children told us that often as parents or as teachers, we rush in with, okay, the first thing we're going to do, we're going to go to the school and we're going to talk to your head of house and we're going to go and see the principal. And the kids just go, oh my goodness, this is so out of control. And they get really frightened and they're shut down. Instead, they said what they'd like to see here is that you get a chance to talk about what they could do and where they have some autonomy and control. And even for younger children, this is still helpful because you're building in them a self-confidence that there are things I can do here versus that learned helplessness. Someone's just going to come in and fix it for me, which at the time that might be helpful, but it's not helping them long term. We're not building resilience. So here you might ask questions like, tell me what you tried. How did that work? Who else has tried that? Does it work for them? What have you seen other children doing in this situation? Could you do that? So really pushing them to think about from their own ideas. And then if they're really stuck, and many times I've done this with children, they go, I don't know what I can do. And then you can ask them questions like, well, when this happened to me, I tried blah, only one thing at a time. Get them no, I couldn't do that. Okay, I've seen somebody else do blah. Do you think that would work? And giving them time to process and really feel like I'm in control here. And then the last, I promise we're coming to an end here. The last E is for end with encouragement. And here, children, particularly Australian children, I worked in the US for 5 years, and this isn't so true for American children, but for Australian children, they don't want to be whingers. And they say, I've told this to someone, I don't want to come back and tell it again because you will just think I'm complaining or that I'm whinging about this issue. And so what we need to do as adults is to say, look, this will get better. It's really tough now. But you know what? I'm around. So as a parent, let's talk about this after school tomorrow. Let's go for a walk and have a chat and so on. Or as a teacher, I'm on duty on Wednesdays. Come and have a chat with me, or come to my office next Wednesday and let me know how this is going. So it's really leaving the door open to have more conversations. And I guess the most important issue when you're having this conversation with children, especially with boys, is don't sit opposite them at a table and look them in the eyes. Walk with them shoulder to shoulder. Have conversations in the car, shoulder to shoulder, where you're sort of on the journey with them, and they'll feel much more comfortable, and you'll probably get a much more in-depth conversation than straight across the table and very intense.
Donna, I love the acronym. When you talk about listening, there's something that I always say to parents, and that is you want to take the ride, not the wheel. Don't take over. And the other thing that really stood out to me is the acknowledgement that it hurts. That line, why don't you just go play with someone else? It's like parents have forgotten that playground dynamics don't really allow for that. But here's my question for you. I reckon there'll be a lot of parents who will listen to this conversation and thinking to themselves, I've done it. I've done all of this. I've had so many tear-filled conversations with my kids where I've listened. I've felt that hurt with them, and we've talked about the pain. We've come up with different options. We've tried to organise play dates. We've done this, that, and the other. We've even intervened with the school and asked them to help. I've had them come back to me with all the encouragement of the world, knowing that they're safe to talk to me if it comes up again. And it just keeps happening. We are in a toxic mess when it comes to bullying in my child. What hope can you offer there? How do we help that parent who just feels like escalating at the school hasn't worked, and all the conversations that they've had walking up and down the beach or down to the park or up and down the street or just in the bedroom and living room, it hasn't gone anywhere?
And that's always a challenge with bullying because it is so complex. And as we've talked about, in this podcast and the previous one, there are so many elements that affect that. But there are some actions parents can take in addition to all that. When you reach that moment, you think, well, what else can I do here? We know that the incident that's occurring right now is awful, and we need to help our children get through that as best we can. But as you used in your example, Justin, sometimes it takes a bit of time to build the strength back up in your children, to give them the skills. And the research around social and emotional skill development and its impact on all outcomes for children, the academic outcomes, wellbeing outcomes, but particularly the bullying outcomes. So give me practice in how I deal with a situation where I feel really anxious. So it's something known as social inoculation theory. And it says, give me practice, set up little scenarios where I get practice in coming up with the right words, almost like a little literacy, a little bag of ideas about what I can say when I'm in this situation again, what I can do that will help me get out of it more easily than I did last time. And to talk to children about, it's about progress. I might start playing a sport and not be very good at it when I start. But if I practice and I go away and build skill, then I'm better at that sport each time. And these social emotional learning skills are skills. And there's lots of good resources online, and no doubt you'll post some in the information that you put out on this podcast, but really great one-on-one practices for children to develop skills like being self-aware. What are my triggers? When that's happening, what do I do? What are the things that calm me down? Do I go for a walk? Do I read? Do I talk to somebody? When I'm in a conflict situation, what are the ways that I can diffuse that conflict and get away and know and practice those so that I can use them much more effectively? How do I support my friends? Because bystanders, that witness who steps up for other people, is much more likely to be protected if somebody then targets them. So practicing those skills are critical to really helping get through that situation as best we can, and about empowering our children so that they have a resource to draw on next time.
I have a provocation to run by you, and I still don't quite know where I sit with it. My provocation is this: when it comes to the idea of changing schools, one of the difficulties that you have is that you take yourself with you when you go. And so if you have those differences, if you have those vulnerabilities where you are more likely to be bullied, the likelihood is that wherever you go, it may still happen. Now, I know that there are many stories that people will share where they've moved schools and it's made all the difference. So I'm really tentative here. Maybe it is just a case-by-case thing. But for those parents who are desperate and thinking, I've got to send the kids to a different school, what's your advice?
It's always an option, of course, and it sometimes can be the issue that diffuses. If it's a particular subgroup of children, maybe it's a cohort. Sometimes we just get a cohort of young people moving through the school that are just really poorly behaved, and taking your children out of that cohort can break that cycle. But we need to be mindful that cyberbullying means that some children are followed. The bullying follows them to wherever they go. So I know we haven't talked about cyberbullying and what parents can do to really help their children with that. But as children move to a new school, that new school needs to be very aware of what happened in the previous school. And there are actions that schools will take. They'll call them tier 2 actions. So kind of early intervention stuff. Extra things that they can do with that student, like helping them to integrate into clubs, helping them to make friends much more quickly so that they have all those protective factors around them, engage them in activities. And schools are really good at this. We just need to make sure they're aware. And sometimes we don't tell the next school all the details, and that may put your children at a disadvantage, because schools do help and do want to help.
Donna, I feel like stopping the conversation now is such an injustice. I think we need about 17 more hours, maybe 17 more days. But can I thank you so much for being so generous and so helpful with what you've shared today?
Thanks very much, Justin. It was such a privilege.
Professor Donna Cross, an emeritus professor at the University of Western Australia and the New South Wales Chief Behaviour Advisor. We'll link to some of Donna's resources and a whole lot more in our show notes. The Happy Families podcast is produced by Justin Rulon from Bridge Media. Mim Hammonds supports with admin and research help. If you'd like more info and more resources, we will link to a whole range of Donna's material and a whole lot more about how to deal with and respond to bullying. And you can also visit happyfamilies.com.au.